Hey guys, today we're here with Professor Dylan Wilson. Can we just start off with you telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. What do you want to know?
Everything.
Sure. So my name is Dylan. I've been a professor at Augusta University this is my 6th year. We're about to finish. Before that, I was a photographer. I went to the University of Georgia for my undergrad. I have degrees in photojournalism and film. After that, I worked at newspapers kind of up the East Coast, Macon, Georgia, Baltimore, New Jersey, Manhattan, New York. Following living in New York for a number of years and working at the New York Post, I moved to Savannah, where I was a freelance photographer, a wedding photographer, photojournalist, a lot of just different random odd photography jobs. Then I got my master's degree at Savannah College of Art and Design, also in photography. And I worked for SCAD in their PR and marketing department as a photographer for, I think, about 3 years before I got this position. How's that? What else would you like to know?
Do you prefer teaching, or did you prefer the freelance work?
Well, they're just very different jobs completely. And I mean, teaching does afford me the opportunity to freelance occasionally. I do a lot of work for the New York Times, a couple of other national and international clients whenever they're looking for work in the Southeast. But teaching it's just very different, and it's very rewarding. And I mean, I think that's something that I thought, especially when I was a young freelance photographer, there were lots of things that I didn't learn when I was in undergrad. I had a good photography teacher. He was not a great teacher in terms of teaching you how to be a professional photographer, to go out on your own and do things like save for taxes or advertise or buy equipment insurance, things like that. So I thought that, it would be great that I could teach other young people about these different skills.
You mentioned advertising. I feel like that's one of the hardest things to teach.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I'm not a great marketer just of myself. And the world has really changed, especially since I was an undergrad. There were a lot of things like you would mail out postcards to photo editors, or you would have printed portfolios. I remember taking a printed portfolio to New York Magazine and dropping it off, and 3 days later going back to the mailroom and picking it up and then taking it to another place. You just don't really do that anymore. You've got a web presence. You might send out cold emails to different photo editors, but typically your portfolio website is your business card. I mean, that's what people are going to judge you on.
In your experience, do you think that is the most important way to market yourself right now?
Yeah, I mean, and there are things that you can do like Google advertising or SEO or things like that so that you come up higher when people are searching for a photographer. I just remember when I was a wedding photographer, you wanted to come up on the page 1 of Google whenever somebody was Googling Savannah wedding photographer, for instance, or Hilton Head wedding photographer. You wanted, they didn't know your name, but they knew that they were going to get married in Savannah. So that was what they were searching for. And you wanted your name to be the first thing that they saw.
Is there a reason that photographers typically use their name as their brand? That's pretty hard to distinguish. You can't really build a persona outside of just your name. There's nothing else there.
Yeah, I think that maybe it goes back to in newspapers, you would have your byline. It would say photo by Dylan Wilson for the Augusta Chronicle or whatever. So maybe it's building on that. It does, you run into issues occasionally, especially if you have a very common name. There's a photographer who was in my cohort in undergrad whose name is David Banks, which is not a super common name, but it's also David is very common. Banks is not uncommon. So he goes by David Walter Banks. So he includes his middle name in there as well to kind of differentiate. I was talking with a student yesterday. Dylan used to be a very unusual name. When I was young, I didn't know any other Dylans, but now there are quite a few, and I see them often. I purchased my domain name 20 plus years ago, and DylanWilson.com was and is still owned by this woman who's a graphic designer. So I bought Dylan Wilson Photography, and that's just what it's been.
My name's like incredibly common. I think there's 2 other people that go to Augusta University that are named Lydia Williams.
That is why I brought it up.
Yeah.
Because you're also using that as your brand.
But I feel like part of the issue with like coming up with a brand name outside of your own like name is that like, what if it gets old to you? I always think about that.
But I'm also looking at it from like the YouTuber content creator perspective, where it's really, you don't use your name in that scenario.
Yeah, you don't.
I think it's just a different field entirely.
And then a lot of people don't use their real name on social media.
Right.
But then their business name is their real name. So.
Yeah, and I mean, I think I'm significantly older than you two, so it might be just a generational thing as well.
Maybe.
I've worked with a lot of older photographers, and most of them, like their email address is just, DylanWilson@AOL.com. And that's just, they're older, and that's just kind of like what the generation did.
We know you like freelanced photography in Savannah. So like what made you make the switch from living in Savannah, doing photography, to coming to Augusta to teach?
I think that's a great question. There was no one inciting incident necessarily. I enjoyed the work that I was doing in Savannah. SCAD is a really interesting institution. There are lots of different events that happen. I was photographing lots of celebrities. I was the president's photographer. But it was a fairly stressful position as well. And I have had some health issues just in my life. And stress is certainly one of those things that contributes to health issues. And I was looking to kind of de-stress. I was also looking to get into teaching just in general. That was one of the reasons why I got my MFA, was I wanted to be a teacher. And it was just kind of really perfect happenstance that I was looking through job boards and I found the Augusta position.
Who's the favorite person you've photographed, or least favorite, whichever?
Least favorite, I don't know, but definitely most boring was Robert Pattinson.
Really?
Interesting.
He's very tall. He's very, very tall, very thin. He just seemed uninterested in everything. Sometimes celebrities are really nice. They're really polite. I remember photographing Richard Gere once, and he made sure to introduce himself to everybody and shake their hand before they started photographing him. William H. Macy, I've worked with several times. He's always very kind, very humble. I really wanted to hate Zach Braff, and he was really interesting and really nice, and really wanted to be involved in the creative process. And a lot of these guys, the biggest thing that they can give you is their time. And I find that a lot of celebrities will give you 10, 15 seconds and then move on. If they're willing to give you 5 minutes, for instance, that's a huge gift from them. So the ones that will do that are really nice.
Yeah, time is the most valuable resource. And I imagine even more so for people like them, where like there's so many things fighting for their time.
Yeah.
We always ask, what have been some highlights in your career so far? And I kind of want to differentiate, like, what have been some highlights in your like photography career, and then like what have been some highlights in your teaching career?
Sure. So I have photographed a lot of cool things. When I was living in Georgia, I photographed the University of Georgia football team nearly every Saturday. There was the year of Katrina, they had the Sugar Bowl in Atlanta, and Georgia won. I don't remember who they beat that year, but Georgia won, and I was there, and I got to photograph that, and that was fun and exciting. The plane that landed on the Hudson River, I was there to photograph that. There was another Tom Hanks movie, Captain Ron, where he was captured by these Somali pirates. I photographed the Somali pirates when they were brought to Manhattan Federal Court. So those are weird, interesting things. But also too, I've like done, that's very flashy, but I've done a lot of like community journalism as well. And I think that sometimes those are the things that are a little bit more important. Those communities, they're the ones who are really appreciative and your photography can make a difference in those communities, and documenting the history of those communities, which is something that has always been really interesting to me. Teaching achievements, I think it's awesome when my students can be successful. And I've had students that work at ESPN and CNN and other places like that, students that are just really talented photographers. They're talented when they're in undergrad, and then they just take those skills and they can really create some amazing work afterwards. That's always really rewarding to me. When they keep up or when they show me photographs that they've made, and we become more peers, and it's less the student-teacher relationship at that point.
Do you have any advice for people who are wanting to go into the career field as like self-employed? Self-employed as photographers, or self-employed as just like, I'm going to be a creator? Let's start with photographers, yeah.
First of all, take a lot of pictures. When you have resources, like when you're in undergrad and maybe you have cameras or things like that you can borrow or check out, make sure that you take advantage of those resources. Create a portfolio, get advice on making the best portfolio possible. That doesn't just mean advice from me, but advice from other professionals as well. And then when you graduate, go out, market yourself, take that portfolio, try to get work. And it's difficult for sure, but I think that if you're good and if you hustle, you can get that work. Lydia, for instance, is a really good portrait photographer. So I think that when she graduates, portrait photography is something that you can do to make money. People always want nice pictures of their face. And that doesn't just mean, things like senior portraits or prom portraits or whatever, or graduation portraits. Places like law firms and doctors' offices, they all need photographs of the people that work there. And those are the places that have money that are able to pay a good photographer. So market yourself, keep building relationships with other photographers, other professionals. If you're young, seek out some kind of mentorship is, I think, other advice that I would give you. Don't be afraid to try different things in photography. I was a photojournalist, and I was an assistant, and I was a PR photographer, and I was a wedding photographer. And I learned from all of those things. Like I'm more complete as a photographer and as an artist now because I had all those other experiences versus had I not had them. And yeah, then at a point, you need to think about surrounding yourself with other people that can elevate you. And I mean, not just other artists, but people like an accountant, people like maybe a social media manager, somebody who can do the work that you don't want to do. Because I'm a photographer. I want to just take pictures. I don't like sitting behind a computer and editing photos. I don't like marketing myself. Yeah, I really don't like editing. That. Well, if that's something that you like, that's great. For me, that was one of the most tedious parts of the job. I really just wanted to shoot.
It is tedious.
So finding other people that can just kind of elevate you as an artist, it's really important as well.
What gets you out of bed in the morning?
My dog. She wakes up.
A common answer.
Yeah, she wakes up at.
It's dog or coffee is one of the two.
The dog gets up. She gets up when the sun rises. So maybe after Saturday when the time changes, she'll get up a little bit later. But we got up at 6:45 this morning.
Oh, wow.
First thing she wants to do is go for a walk. Nice. So we walk about a mile around Somerville, and then I can come back and make coffee. So that's what gets me up.
It's not a bad routine to have.
No.
Okay, so
it is when it's cold or it's raining or it's snowing or something like that. So
at least you got outside. What's your guilty pleasure outside of your career?
My guilty pleasure.
I feel like it's gonna be like trash TV or something.
Well, Aaron and I were talking. I don't really have TV. I watch YouTube.
Really? Do you watch Aaron's YouTube?
I've seen Aaron's YouTube. Yes. No, I like food. There's when I took the tour of Augusta University, you at one point drive from Somerville campus to Christenberry, and the guy who was leading the tour, he pointed over in the direction of Daniel Village and he said, "There's a Dairy Queen behind that. That's very important." So I live about a mile from this Dairy Queen, and I don't want to go once a week, but I usually go about once a week to get a
love
blizzard.
Dairy Queen.
Yeah.
I haven't had Dairy Queen in a long time.
I go to that specific one with like my Bible study group sometimes.
It's not something that you think about until you think about it, and then you can't stop thinking about it.
Yeah.
I could see that.
Dairy Queen's one of the only fast food places in my hometown. So like after every single like theater performance or like cross country meet, we'd go to Dairy Queen. And I kind of don't really like it anymore. But
Oh.
Well, they change the blizzards every
Really?
season.
Oh yeah, they do.
So you can.
The blizzards will always be good.
And Dairy Queens are often like hit or miss, like location wise.
Yeah.
So you just need to find a good
the one in my hometown is just like nostalgic. Like it's the only one I like.
I see.
Okay, this is Aaron's question to ask, but I'm gonna ask it. If you could telepathically reach every student at once, what would you say to
See,
them?
this is why I asked the question and you don't.
Telepathically reach every student.
It would have made more sense if Aaron asked it.
If you could say something telepathically to every student simultaneously, like it just happens in their head, what would you say to them?
Don't give up. It's worth it. I don't know. I mean, those are all kind of silly things, but I think that what we're doing here is important, and what you guys as students are doing here is important for your future. That you're doing this, and when things are hard, you need to think about what life is going to be like down the road. I don't know. I've been told I say a lot, so maybe it would just be
Filler words are the death of society.
Wait, Aaron, what would you tell, like if you could talk to freshmen in the communication department, what would you say to them?
Go to class.
Like
probably.
Like a serious answer or like a fun answer?
I don't know, whatever you want to say.
I guess the serious answer would be to go to class and connect with one of the faculty members, like, because mentorship is a very important thing, especially for freshmen, because they're like trying to navigate a major that's pretty broad. And so like finding someone who can help you hone in on that is really important. A funny answer would be like,
go to my YouTube channel.
No, like God is real or something. This is God. He is real.
Oh, okay.
I think that'd be really silly.
Gotcha.
If a student heard like, go to my YouTube channel, I think they would freak out more than anything. I don't think they would go to the YouTube channel.
Yeah. Do you enjoy teaching sports photography or like regular photography better?
They're very similar. There obviously are differences, but I loved being a sports photographer. Being a sports photographer, I've told you guys this, it ruins you for being a fan. I don't want to go to a sporting event and not be on the court or not be on the field. So I love sports photography, and I love just kind of the the adrenaline rush that you get from being around the players and being close to the action. That's really exciting and really, really fun for me. But regular photography, just the kind of introductory photography class, is so foundational for everything that you can do as a visual artist. I mean, that class teaches skills that are specific to photography, but also can work in any other medium, any other visual medium. So if you're doing video or if you're painting or drawing or things like that, I mean, the rule of thirds kind of transcends photography. So I enjoy teaching that introductory photography class as well. I don't want my students to be incredible photographers when they come out. I mean, it'd be great if they were, but I also understand that like I can't make a student an incredible photographer in one semester. Nobody can. But I want you to be a slightly better photographer and maybe enjoy photography, or at least know a little bit more about photography than when you came into the class. Those are kind of my goals.
Yeah. I feel like sports and just like regular portraits are so different. Like I didn't feel like they were different whenever I first started shooting, but the more I do it, the more differences I notice. I'm not the biggest fan of sports photography, even though I do that like a lot. I don't want to do it after I graduate other than like as a hobby. But I feel like it can become mundane. Like it doesn't have the creative element behind it the same way that like portrait photography has.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly think that being a sports photographer helped me to be a better wedding photographer.
100%. It's definitely helped me a lot because it's harder than portrait photography in a lot of ways.
Well, I mean, you're dealing with subjects that are moving around and maybe they're unpredictable, and you're thinking about moments that are going to happen like once in our human history, and you have to be there to make that photograph. And then, technical things like maybe you're setting up remote cameras. I used to work in these old churches in Savannah where they didn't want you to go. They wanted you to stay in the back, but they were okay with me setting up a remote camera somewhere so that I could get a different angle. And that knowledge and that skill came directly from sports photography. So I think that there are lots of things that sports photography teaches you that you can translate into other photographic areas. Portrait photography is the same way. I mean, there's skills that you don't think about, like posing, and I'm not great at posing people. Getting better at that skill is going to yield better photographs. Those are just other skills that you can gain from that aspect of photography as well.
I feel like with sports too, you have to work pretty hard to be creative in your shots, and you have to think about it a lot more, and you have to be very intentional. And with portrait photography, sometimes it's easy to like not have a lot of intention behind your shots because you're just like going through your shot list. So I think that helped me like really think about my shots whenever it came to portraits. Yeah,
I mean, sports photography, often you're put kind of in a box, stay here, you can't move. So getting something creative, yes, can be a challenge. That was one of the issues, one of the reasons why I really started to not like wedding photography as well. Is, I mean, what's going to happen at a wedding. They're going to get ready. There's going to be a ceremony. You're going to do portraits, and then there's going to be a party. That's going to happen at every wedding. So if you think about it that way, like, okay, well, I'm just kind of going through the motions and I've got these 4 things that I need to check off. It's hard to be creative. So instead you kind of have to really focus on individual moments and, challenge yourself to make the easy shot, but then also try for something that's a little bit more creative.
How have you seen the field of photography evolve over time, and where do you see it in like 10, 15 years?
10, 15 years, I have no idea. But when I was starting as a photographer, I took a graphic arts class in 9th grade, and we shot black and white film. We developed it in a dark room. We printed pictures in a dark room, which obviously is not something that we do now. We do have a dark room on campus.
Really?
And I've taken photo students over there sometimes, and it is fun. It's
Where
cool.
Is it?
It's over in Washington Hall.
Oh, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah. That's really interesting.
It is, and it's a fun experience, I think, for students to kind of see. You really see some of the magic of photography, the alchemy, like where you're mixing up chemicals and shining light on this piece of paper, and you're in this red room, and then all of a sudden something appears. So when I started photography, I was shooting film. When I was in undergrad, we were the first class to not shoot film. We were the first class to be all digital.
Wow.
So we had these very old Canon Rebels, I think. The first camera that I had that was like mine was a Nikon D1H, and it made 1 megapixel photographs, which is very, very small compared to cameras now. I had a 1 gigabyte compact flash card. Now you get, 64 gigs or 128 gigs, these massive cards. Every camera that I buy is the best camera that I've ever used. Camera technology has gotten so good and so amazing. Like the camera that Lydia got that we're shooting on right now is an incredible camera. It is like technically better than any camera that I've ever had.
Especially for the price.
They're just...
How much was it?
Well, my camera body itself was $8.99, I think, which is pretty cheap compared to the rest of the cameras out there.
And I mean, I've used just really crazy cameras, and the technology is really insane. One of the things that I think technologically is going to change photography, just kind of radically alter it, is AI. We're seeing not only fully AI images, there's fully AI videos, things like the 4300 class that you were in, Aaron, where you can use the AI that's native in Photoshop to create things that you could probably technically make in Photoshop, but they're made so quickly and so easily. And that technology is only going to get better. There were plenty of things that AI does very poorly.
We had fun experimenting with that.
Yeah,
in class.
but there are plenty of things that the AI does like really passably well.
Scarily well.
And it's only going to get better. And I think like balancing what's real and what's not real, that's always hard for the average people to differentiate. And that's one reason why photojournalism ethics are so important. Mm-hmm. But I think it's only going to become more difficult in the future. And I'm really curious because one of the big things about working in photojournalism is you caption your image. And I'm curious, at what point is AI going to be able to look at an image and understand what's going on and just write a caption for you?
I feel like we're already there.
I think we probably are, but I think it's still like a process of you need a human to like check and make sure that the computer is telling the truth. But and then in post-processing with AI, when I was working for SCAD and public relations, we would do a tremendous amount of post-processing work that honestly we had 3 retouchers, and you could take up an entire day just working on 1 or 2 images. And now with AI and just the native things in Photoshop, it's so much faster and so much easier and so much better than I could do.
There's a few platforms out now that will edit your entire gallery for you. Like if you put in your Lightroom preset, it'll edit your entire gallery. Like pretty much I think you like submit one photo that you want your entire gallery to look like. And they're expensive platforms, but it's pretty insane what they can do. Yeah, a lot of wedding photographers are using them because wedding photographers will have insanely huge galleries. So
yeah, I mean, if you're I used to deliver about 100 pictures an hour as a wedding photographer. Yeah. So if you're shooting an 8-hour wedding, that's 800 photographs, which, I already said I didn't like the editing process. So if you can cut that out and it looks better, it's totally worth it, in my opinion. Plus, you just pass that cost on to the consumer.
Do you think that, I guess, taints the art in any way, the use of AI?
It just makes it different. I mean, artists have been using computers in their art since computers were invented. It's just another medium. Does it taint pure photography? I don't know. What is pure photography anymore? Is digital pure photography?
That's a good point.
I don't know the answer to that, and I think that people would argue, but there are also people that would argue photography is not even an art. That it's a lesser art than painting or drawing or something like that. It's a young art for sure. It's it's not even 200 years old, whereas painting and drawing has been around since human civilization has been around. So yes, in that respect, it is young. Does it deserve respect? I think so. I think there are very talented artists working in photography, but there are plenty of people who would disagree with me.
That's interesting that we would even consider ranking art forms in that way.
Yeah, artists can be kind of pretentious.
Yeah, that's so lame because it's all self-expression. Why do we gotta choose which one's best?
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, I feel like the profession of photography will never go away though. No matter how much AI comes onto the scene.
We talked about that last semester.
Yeah.
What did I ask you? I asked if you thought photography was dying.
Oh, yeah. I think we were talking about newspapers and that led to it or something like that.
I'm imagining you do not think photography is dying.
I don't think that it's dying. No, I mean, I think that you can look at things like newspapers and say, yes, newspapers are dying. I was very lucky that I entered the workforce when I did, and I was able to work at newspapers. I really enjoyed working at newspapers, but the newspapers that I worked at are a shell of themselves if they even exist anymore. A newspaper I worked at in New Jersey closed on February 1st, and it had been publishing for 157 years. Wow. So it's terrible for that community. It served one county in northern New Jersey. And now that county they have the Newark Star Ledger, but that's that's Newark. That's not Jersey City. That's not Bayonne. That's not, West New York. So covering those, there's nothing that covers those communities. And I feel like Augusta has really become that way as well. When I was an undergrad, the Augusta Chronicle was a great photo newspaper. People like Jeff Blake and Rachel Rick and Jerry Melendez all worked here, and they made awesome photos. They covered University of Georgia. They covered the National. They covered Augusta really, really well. And I feel like now the Chronicle is really just a shell of itself, which is really unfortunate. I mean, we have other news sources in Augusta. The Bell Ringer is honestly, I think, one of the best news sources in Augusta.
I actually interviewed for a job yesterday, and the guy interviewing me brought up the Bell Ringer because I told him I shoot sports for it, and he was like, I read that every single day. Wow. And it was just very interesting because he's in his 40s and isn't even an alum and reads it every day.
I mean, you guys asked what big achievements when as a professor, and I mean the Bell Ringer is, I think, certainly one of the things I was really proud to. I'm really proud to have been the faculty advisor for the Bell Ringer. I mean, the students that work for the Bell Ringer, the writers, the photographers, they do incredible work. The people doing social media, they do really, really strong work, and it's a great service to the community that the community really needs, honestly. But is photography dying? Photography, it's changing. But you have mediums like Instagram. We see more photographs now in one day than people would see in their entire lives, which is a wild thing to think about. But scrolling Instagram, you see good work, you see bad work, but you're seeing photos, and you're looking at people's self-expression, the way that they see the world.
Yeah, we really do consume so much media, and I've thought a lot about like how that affects our perception of the art. Like, if we're consuming like dozens of photos in like 1 hour, like, do we think less of that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
it's really sad, I feel like.
Well, I mean, I think that good work always is elevated. So if you see a good photograph, if I see a good photograph, for instance, I might screenshot it. I might make a note of it. I might follow the photographer. But yes, we see a lot more mediocre work, sure.
Like Lydia's work. Sorry, I had to.
I don't follow Lydia on Instagram, but I'm told that she makes really good photographs.
Oh, we don't have a Rate My Professor segment. I did forget about that.
How do you read my mind?
I knew you were looking for it. So normally in the show, at the end, we show the guest a negative Rate My Professor review, and they have to read it out loud, and then we talk about it.
Do I have any negatives?
You don't have any.
Yeah.
So we don't have the segment.
It's mostly
perfect.
It's mostly students from COMM-10. So they are young and can be kind. It's when you get older, you get meaner. I haven't looked at Rate My Professor in a long time. But there are student evaluations that we get every semester. And I've gotten some negative student evaluations. So I've just learned to be strong and just carry on.
Do you have any advice for navigating that sort of negative feedback?
Communicate with your professor. If there are issues that you're having that you're unhappy about, communicate. I'm really easy to talk to, and I'm really open to change. But if you're leaving a negative review because I say a lot, I'm sorry. I can work on that. But I've just done it twice in this sentence. So it's obviously something that you might just have to deal with. And that was a critique in one of my
crazy.
Saying a lot.
Yeah, I say a lot.
I feel like that has no reflection on how you are as a professor.
It's okay. Yeah. I'm stronger. I'm better. Yeah. But it's something that I know that I can work on.
Yeah.
To connect us in this way, when I first started doing YouTube, I said a lot, and at one point someone made an edit of every time I said within like 5 years worth of videos.
Gosh, I can never be a celebrity.
And I just said it again, and now I'm like critically thinking about it.
Well, if you're doing video, or if you're doing an audio medium, you could cut all those out. And
I've started doing that.
Well, we had an audio engineer years ago, and she would edit Dr. Bulla's podcast and take out all the and then she would mash them all together and show me, and it was funny.
I should do that for this episode.
Absolutely. I'm not opposed.
Post-production Aaron, please try to do that. If you have enough caffeine in your system, do that.
Well, any other questions? Is that it?
I think that's it.
Yeah.
I think we're past time.
You're closing up.
Well, thank you for giving us your time. I really appreciate it. We learned a lot about you. I'm doing exactly what Lydia does each time we do the. Thank you for listening and watching. We'll see you guys in the next episode.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.